You're listening to episode 188 of The Secular Buddhist. Welcome to The Secular Buddhist. I'm Ted Meissner. The Secular Buddhist is the official podcast of the Secular Buddhist Association, a grassroots-driven effort to answer the needs of secular teaching and practice for contemporary society. The podcast has interviews and roundtable discussions pertaining to engaged Buddhist training and practice, and the SBA website has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Though the podcast focuses on core practice from a secular viewpoint, more traditional teachings are welcome and openly discussed. Adam Eurich returns to speak with us about the progress of his documentary film exploring American Buddhism, Seeking Heartwood. Hi everyone. Before we get started with today's episode, I want to remind the listeners that we've started a new podcast which may also interest you. It's called Present Moment, Mindfulness, Practice, and Science, and appears every other week, alternating with The Secular Buddhist. You'll find many of the same guests you've enjoyed and learned from here, as well as new teachers, researchers, and practitioners. You'll find Present Moment in the Science and Medicine section of iTunes in Natural Sciences, or just do an iTunes search on mindfulness and look for the results in the Podcasts section. You can also visit the website, presentmomentmindfulness.com. Thanks for checking it out, and if you like what you hear, please feel free to share it with others. Buddhism, like other traditions, becomes acculturated to the society in which it finds itself. It adapts existing forms and attitudes while sharing its own teaching and practice to a new group of people. That engagement and transformation is happening today, and whether you think of America as a melting pot or a tossed salad, Buddhism is influencing our culture and is itself being influenced. A self-educated, one-man documentary filmmaking crew, Adam Eurich originally studied engineering at UT Austin. After a 5-year career as a structural engineer in Washington, D.C., he left that life behind to explore his passion, Buddhism. Prior to this major change, he had practiced for over 10 years in nearly every major tradition, interviewing with Zen masters, surviving the Theravada Vipassana retreats, and performing Tibetan rituals and visualizations. To further explore Buddhism in America, he embarked on what has become a 21-month-long road trip to create a documentary film about the Buddha's teachings and how they're manifesting in our modern society. Adam documents his journey into American Buddhism through a blog and photography on his site, seekingheartwood.com. So sit back, relax, and have a nice sobe green tea. And our guest today, returning, is Adam Eurich. Adam, welcome back. Good to talk with you again.
Thanks, Ted. It's always a pleasure to speak with you as well.
So we're catching up on our last conversation in episode, I think it was 132, where we talked with you about your film project, Seeking Heartwood. And at that time, the crowdsourcing campaign was released at the same time as the podcast. You have a big story to tell us about where you are today. Since then, that was quite some time ago.
Yeah, it was just over a year ago now. So, and thanks again for your help releasing that podcast at the same time. It was great to get, my voice out to your viewers right as the project started, because a lot of people wanted to find out more than was just on the website or the Kickstarter video. And I think that that interview really went a long way. So thank you very much for that. It must have done really well because it got me to raise $30,000 on Kickstarter.
Awesome. Congratulations. That's great.
It was wonderful. I mean, wonderful to get the funds, wonderful to kind of grow the community of people who know about the film, and just wonderful to just see the generosity of people in their desire to see content and media that, reflects Buddhist values and ideas. And I think we all feel like this stuff can really help make the world a better place in various different ways. So it was nice to be a part of that. It really felt like I was just a part of something bigger, and that was really wonderful.
Great. And now at that point, you'd done quite a number of interviews and you still had a lot more going. Tell us about how that process continued.
That process continued much more smoothly after having some funds to continue forward. So I got to visit a lot of places around the country that require me to fly to or take longer to get to. So basically, right off the bat, I went over to the East Coast and spent a couple months over there interviewing Joseph Goldstein. Since then, I've interviewed about another 30 people, and I had expected to interview about 10 more after that. But every time I met somebody new and I had a great interview, something else would come up, and I kind of just let the project go with that and let it grow and grow. And now I have something of about 60 interviews with Jodo Shinto priests to neuroscientists to, these great jhana teachers to wonderful small Zen group teachers that nobody's heard of but are doing wonderful things, to chaplains. I kind of have all of them in front of me just to kind of, because it's so, I talk to so many people, it takes me a bit to remember, oh yeah, I talked to this person, that person, and take it all in. Stephen Batchelor, Martine, Tara Brack, Lee Brasington I had already done.
In fact, the last time I saw you when we were together for the Secular Buddhist Colloquium at the Barry Center, that's when I finally got to do an interview with Lee about the jhanas.
Yeah, but that's great. I love his approach, and it's very even-handed, and it makes you feel like anybody can do it, and he really encourages people to try and to enjoy the joy that comes with that. So that's always a wonderful message. But so I went all over the East Coast, came back to the West Coast. I took Richard Gombrich's Poly course and got to interview him, and it just kind of grew and grew. I'm tapering off now just because I have too many interviews as it is, even though I'd love to go another month or two on the road and get another couple small interviews. But it's time to stop and put this thing together now.
So how much content do you have if you measured it in hours or?
Yeah, over 500 hours. And I've been editing it for a couple months now, and it feels like I've barely made a dent. But that's how it goes, especially in the beginning. And especially on a documentary like this, the creative process is a lot of going through what you have and seeing what's there instead of making it what you want it to be. And transcription takes a very, very long time.
Tell us more about the transcription itself. I know that's been an important part of how this works for you, but help us understand, those of us who are not filmmakers. We have this image, or at least I do, of a filmmaker sitting and they're in the editing room and they're just watching hours and hours and hours of film. And you're also looking at transcriptions. How is that helping you? How does that work?
Yeah, so I'm looking through the interviews, I'm viewing them, and I'm transcribing them, and I'm cutting them kind of all at the same time so that everything's really fresh with me as I'm going through it. I'm writing out what people are saying and breaking it up into chunks and sectioning it off so it'll play well off of someone else commenting on the same topic. And then I use, that transcription to build basically the screenplay for a documentary, which is definitely necessary to submit to film festivals and things like that. So there's a lot more writing than I had expected. Not just the transcribing, but, describing the transitions and the scenes in between, and just to push my own articulation for how I want this to go. Because I don't know if I'll do the narration for the film, but there will be some narration. And so that's all got to be written and give people a context for, 60 different viewpoints on the Dhamma.
So do you have your high-level outline of different sections of interview, or are you still in the process of formulating that view?
No, I do have a lot of that. In a lot of the past 3 months, as going through the interviews, transcribing what they're saying and cutting it up into sections, has been developing that outline. Because it's funny, I had one outline when I started this project, which I had to redo about 5 or 6 times, and then had a solid one going into the editing process, and that's had to change a couple times, and that's just how it goes. So it's a nice thing to play with and dance with. You really feel like you're molding and sculpting something and chipping away at something that's kind of already there in a way.
So, Adam, in the past year, with this additional set of roughly 30 interviews you've done since we last spoke with you, I'd asked this question in our first interview as well. What were some of the things that stood out for you that were really either surprising or very meaningful to you personally?
There's one in particular. Sometimes these interviews get really personal. I don't have a stock set of interview questions that I'm asking these people, and I'm not trying to manufacture this experience where I'm like, okay, make sure you repeat the question back to me so I can edit it. I'm really going for something sincere and authentic. And when I bring that to the table and a teacher that I'm interviewing brings that to the table, it can be really difficult sometimes. It can be really touching and heartwarming. And sometimes for me, it can be really challenging, especially interviewing some Zen teachers. There's one in particular who I interviewed towards the end, and I guess I brought, 2.5 years of traveling and filmmaking and Buddhism into the interview. And it went in such a way that he was able to help me cut through all of that and get to what was really in my heart at that time. That experience really changed my life and means a lot to me. And I owe him a great deal for helping me cut through all that I had been pulling together and culminating with this film and helping me let it go. That would be the number one experience. I don't know if that articulates it well enough for your viewers or if that's a little too vague.
No, that articulates it very well because it says that there's been a progress in your own practice, in your own growth of how you engage with what we call Buddhism. And one thing I would like you to do is talk a little bit more about that for you personally, your own journey in your understanding and your practice engagement.
Yeah, I mean, this has changed everything for me, this project. It's changed my relationship with Buddhism. It's changed my relationship with my life. It's radically changed the way I view Buddhism because Buddhism points back at my own life and my own experiences. It's not a philosophy. It's not a religion. It's not an institution. It's not just a set of practices. There's that old cliche or Chinese saying that, there's the finger pointing to the moon. Don't concentrate on the finger or you'll miss all that heavenly glory. I finally get that Buddhism is really pointing to back into your life. And this has been really interesting to me because I feel like in the context of secular Buddhism, it's changed my relationship with religion in general. It feels like religion is meant to be transformative. It's meant to turn you back out into the world. And in a sense, I'm kind of playing with words here. It's meant to secularize your relationship with religion. Like that's religion's job. It's meant to take you and especially Buddhism. It really focuses on putting you in touch with a deeper connection with your experience. And if that doesn't transcend religion and secularism and Buddhism, then I don't know what does. And it's something that I'm still wrestling with to this day, and it's part of the reason I'm taking my time editing this film because I'm still kind of reeling from all the changes this project has put me through and figuring out how to voice them through narration, through scenes, through themes, through emotional content of the movie. I did all these interviews and they meant one thing to me at the time, and now they mean something entirely different.
Yeah, it can be a process of growing into yourself. And we think of these religious ideologies sometimes as instruments, as things that we drive or join or become.
Yeah, or at the worst, and end in and of themselves, and that's really the biggest mistake and folly that happens to religion. turns people back into keeping it going, instead of turning people back into their lives and their experiences, which are so rich, man. I would just people have really, really great lives, and sometimes we miss it for a long time. We're not really experiencing that.
Yeah, it's bringing us back to what is and the process and that path we take, twisted and turning and moving all around, is often such a long way that we sometimes have to take to get back to our starting point, which is just this present moment.
Yeah, it's interesting that you have to go on a path and you have to start somewhere, and it has to be a place of confusion, ignorance, and you have to work through that. You have to have a relationship with that for a while. You have to have a relationship with craving when it comes to Buddhism, when it comes to enlightenment or awakening or anything like that. And you have to, it gives you a structure to kind of view the things you're doing already in your life. And then you get to see it in the structure of Buddhism, and it gets to wake you up from that, from the chase and the craving and the confusion in Buddhism, and then help you see that in your daily life and kind of hopefully have a shift of some sort of realizing that you have a bunch of ideas about things, and those ideas are just that. They're just ideas and abstract concepts and labels that have to do with how you thought of things before, and there's a direct, immediate relationship that is also there. I can't even say something like one is more real than the other because the words just don't really matter. I mean, the present moment includes everything. That Zen guy I interviewed in Cleveland, he told me this great thing. He told me that I was trying to separate ignorance and wisdom. And it was that really, really, and he was right. And that really, really changed things for me. That I really was still evaluating things, evaluating my experience, in terms of certain criteria. And instead of realizing that all of it was accepted, confusion is accepted, ignorance is accepted, craving is accepted.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes from Edward Albee's Play the Zoo story is, sometimes we have to go a long distance out of our way in order to come back a short distance correctly. This points to the whole, we do need to nonetheless have that experience of, as Gautama would say, truly know suffering and going through that journey and that progress and that growing period, as painful as it sometimes is, to have that versatility of just being present with whatever it is and not getting sucked into the discursive thought about it.
Yeah, and that's very difficult. And sometimes you really push far into the discursive thought area just to kind of, because you got to do it. You got to feel the pain of that and how much it takes you away from things. And then you kind of learn that lesson. You come back and you sway back and forth. And I don't think you ever settle in a place where you don't have discursive thought. You just kind of have a different relationship with things. Different relationship with suffering, with craving, with whatever.
So, as you've been working on the film, you've also been doing a number of other projects. And why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the things you've been doing? Because I've run into you a couple places happily in the past year. Tell us a little bit about some of those.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, I love the Buddhist community. I mean, what better community to want to contribute filmmaking services to than people who are really exploring the boundaries of adapting a whole new religion or, this existent religion to a whole new social setting. So the Secular Buddhist Conference that we both went to, they invited me to come out and film all of those presentations, which was wonderful because that's my free pass to see 30 amazing thinkers and speakers and teachers speak about secular Buddhism. So it was a joy of an experience. It was great to film. When I go to things like that and I get to film, I really feel like I'm getting to contribute in a way because I read a lot of books, about these old ancient masters, and it would have been so great if someone had a camera to kind of see their personalities and their mannerisms and preserve more than just, their words on paper. So I feel like I get to do that. And then now that Secular Buddhist conference I'm going to turn to a short documentary about that topic of secular Buddhism, which will be a lot of fun because a lot of those presentations, as you know, were about what is secular Buddhism, and right now there's nothing I love more than questions. Answers that disagree. That's like my favorite thing in the world right now. That's what I got out of my film, and I feel like that's a lot of what happened at the Secular Buddhist Conference. It doesn't mean there's not progress and growth, but that really happens through disagreement and dialogue and true conversations.
Yeah, that was one of the opportunities you and I spoke about that was, I wish we could have done more with, is that you film presentations, and that's a one-sided teacher and brilliant teachers and wonderful people and outstanding authors sharing what they know and their views on things. But some of the most interesting and compelling and meaningful and deep interactions occurred in between. Tell us a little bit about that and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, that was great. I wish I could have filmed a little more of that, but oftentimes people aren't used to having a videographer in their midst, kind of capturing everything. So I think that the whole event was so new altogether that we decided not to go forward with that. If we do it again in the future, I'd love to capture that because the multifaceted communication, the two-way communication, the back and forths that are interesting and alive and a lot more fun to watch than someone at the front of the room speaking to everybody else. But that's where I come in, and I mix up those presentations and try to give something a little more dynamic to watch. But yeah, I was kind of kicking myself for not being able to film those wonderful conversations. And it would have been great to have another, camera guy there to get, a couple different angles and all that fun stuff. So it's nice. I do want to continue to film in Buddhist communities, and I want to start pushing the limits of what we're allowed to film and seeing how far we can take it and bring it to life. I got to go around the country and film certain things, and there was a lot of interviews, but there was a lot that I didn't get to do because I didn't have a crew of people, or people didn't know who I was. And I feel like after people see this film, they'll have a lot more confidence in my ability to really represent the dynamic interactions that go along in these communities, and hopefully allow me a little more freedom to push further and further.
I also ran into you at another event that we tend to attend every year, and that's the Buddhist Geeks Conference. Tell us a little bit about that and how that went for you.
That is always such a great experience because I have to admit, I see a lot of older communities in Buddhism, and that's one I get to go to every year, where I know I'm going to get to see a bunch of green kids, who really love this stuff and are enthusiastic about it and want to explore. And speaking to them, to their interest in technology, their interest in how they relate to data and information, how technology can push the limits of understanding what happens in the processes of the brain during meditation. And I got to film a lot there, and I got to be the official photographer, which was great. So I was the official photographer, and I basically snuck in a lot of filming while I was there for them, and then they used a lot of that B-roll for their Kickstarter program, which I don't know what happened to that. But then I made just a little short kind of montage video for them just to give them something back, a video. It's basically a Pablo Das music video set in the Buddhist Geeks Conference. So that's online on my website, and probably theirs as well, if anybody wants to see that. So just a fun little 4-minute thing.
Excellent. In fact, for folks listening, I'll do my best to embed that in the episode page for this episode.
Yeah, that'd be great. I wish the audio was a little better, but it's a fun video, though. And it gives people a sense of what it looks like to be there a little bit and how much conversations happen at a conference like that. Because that's one thing I don't know people realize is it is all about the in-between conversations at these conferences. So just like at the Secular Buddhist Conference.
Yeah, are you finding that intersection is the fascinating, fun, learning-rich moment rather than the talk?
Yeah, I'm a little tired of one-way communication. I mean, I grew up in America. I got to enjoy that for 16 years of education. And then going around, and there's a lot of that in Buddhism still, which it's not a bad model. It's just that I've really learned the value of community through my experiences in Buddhism and the value of open, free discussions where everybody feels like they can say something because you can learn something from everybody, if you're really open to it, especially people you disagree with. Going and seeing a speaker that you love and you love what they have to say is an entirely different experience from having to, really explore something with another person in front of you that you do not agree with and actually don't like what they're saying.
Yeah, one is a validation, another is perhaps more rich with growth opportunities.
Yeah, I'd like to start a group where I'm at in Long Beach, a sitting group that is all about people coming together and focusing on what their questions are and finding out what are they looking for. Because sometimes people show up in Buddhism and we're so ready to tell them about craving and suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path, the wonders of dependent origination. But sometimes people need a little bit of time just to experience that place and to find out why they're there and to listen to what's going on in them that brought them there. And that's the kind of platform I'd like to create for people.
I'll be interested in hearing more about that. So when that when that gets set up, come back and talk with us about that. But you have other topics to do first, which is finish this film. So tell us a little bit about that. What are the steps you need to take next, and how and when might the film be released? How would people end up getting to see it?
Yeah, I've learned a lot more about that recently. So next for me is, as much as I hate to do it, I've got to raise more funds. It's this interesting part of. I just watched this documentary about filmmaking, and I think it was Marlon Brando who said filmmaking is 95% fundraising and 5% making films. And I'm starting to see that because it takes a lot of time and resources. As I plan out my post-production phase, there's a lot of things that are going to go into it. It'll take me about 4 to 5 months to finish the film. I'm going to try to raise some money right now to get this to. There's a level of polishing that professional films have that I really like to strive for. I've got great content. I've got a good story. I'm making a lot of progress on the editing and this sort of thing. But as I get closer to that, it would be nice to bring in some professional consultants to help me dot the T's or dot the I's and cross the T's and all that sort of thing. But the film should be done in April of 2014. I signed myself up for a 2-week retreat, so it's got to be done before that. And that's my reward for getting the film done, is a 2-week retreat. So from there, it will go off to film festivals. I've already been speaking with distributors. But, it's amazing how much things are changing right now. Just not from just the technology of how to make a film and how many people have access to it, but the technology behind distribution. Self-distribution becomes more and more of a viable option as time goes on. And so I may keep the online rights and do that and put it on Netflix, iTunes, Amazon, wherever I feel like young people will be perusing, the internet. That's where I'd like to have the film on, and I feel like I can do something that speaks to those people. And then hopefully get a small theatrical release, but that depends on how well it does in film festivals and getting a distributor to pick it up and helping me make that push, because that's quite a lot of work and money that goes into that. So,
well, keep us posted on how that goes and with any developments with your own sitting group as that progresses over time.
I figured out what I want to do next, and I don't know if that's relevant to this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. What comes after all this?
So I love filmmaking and I love Buddhism, and I'll keep that moving forward, but I need something of a sustainable day-to-day career to keep me going. And I've been thinking a lot about that for a long time. I've been open to what might come next. I think I'm going to become a chaplain. It's something that came up after reading Danny Fisher's book, and I interviewed him for my film. And then more and more I get into my practice and I grow as a person, it feels like I've been looking for a wonderful opportunity to take what Buddhism has offered me and pour it back into the world. And it feels like that's a great environment to do something like that, to be present for people in their most difficult experiences and really have it be about them and not about me and the thoughts that go on in my head about what religion is or Buddhism or any of that stuff, but just to really be present for people in their most difficult situations. If Buddhism has given me any gift, it's that ability to feel like I can really be there for another human being. And I feel like if I could do a little more of that, I'd really, really be happy with a life like that.
And there are a number of Buddhist chaplaincy programs that are now available that perhaps a decade ago might not have been in place, and just general chaplaincy programs as well that are non-denominational to help with that. And so I want to hear more about that as time progresses as well.
Yeah, sure. But I'll probably go to Danny Fisher's program just because he's great and I love what they're doing there. But yeah, it's a huge question of where I'll end up after that, because you can go at a hospital, you can go to a university, you can do disaster relief. Who knows? I may even join the military, which is just like, I always thought I'd never do that. But I never thought I'd make a movie. I never thought I'd consider being a religious professional. I was such a secular humanist for so long, but I get to choose what religion means to me. I get to make it about the human element.
Right, exactly. It doesn't need to be about the ideology. It's about the people.
Exactly. And that's something that the secular Buddhist movement has pushed me towards and helped me appreciate, that I can have a relationship with the domains that religion normally takes over, and I can have one that's free of dogma and ideology and kind of the staticness that comes with following a religion religiously.
Yeah, that we don't need to consider these as mutually exclusive aspects to our lives. They can still be integral to what we do as people.
Yeah. And what we do as people is very important.
Well, for folks listening, you can find out more about Adam and his work on seekingheartwood.com. And Adam, tell us a little bit about what's there and what's coming on the site.
Sure. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Seeking Heartwood is kind of my blog where I keep people updated about the progress of the film. So it's been a little slow as I focus on editing, but hopefully by the time this is up, there will be a trailer for the film, which I know a lot of people have been asking me for and would love to see. So hopefully I'll have that up, and I'll have some more detailed information about where the film is at, what needs to happen next. There'll be something of a fundraising kit to give people info on what they're contributing towards if they feel like helping make this film happen. And I do have a nonprofit fiscal sponsor now. One of the Buddhist churches in California is sponsoring me. So yeah, tax-deductible donations for the film. But that'll be up soon.
Great. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ted. Always a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the SBA website at secularbuddhism.org, and you'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. Discussion about this episode can be found on the episode page itself, along with show notes. The music for The Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizen Neptune's CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Monty Levinson of Taihei Shakuhachi and Rodrigo Rodriguez. Their websites are also linked on the SBA site on the About Podcast Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on The Secular Buddhist.